Well, another time to rant, I guess. There's so much going on. It seems hard to keep up with it and work through it. I pretty much have given up on watching the news as it is. It seems to me that the bias that used to be more subtle and less obvious, that's gone. I mean, they don't care that you can see the bias. I mean, with the story that breaks on Hunter Biden, well, you know, that needs to be discussed, even if it turns out to be not true. It needs to be even addressed so that we can begin to think about that. But there seems to be a lot of truth to it. Why? Well, because you're now seeing the emails from a former business associate who's been put into solitary confinement for his own good because he's about ready to get more information out. The establishment of two witnesses, judiciary processes are pretty much established. I mean, two witnesses, and then you get three, and then pretty soon there's a case to be had. Whereas the supposition that Trump and his campaign was colluding with the Russians, well, that didn't really end up having any merit. It got plenty of coverage. And to this day, many people still believe that it was. But a lot of people are starting to see through that with a smoke screen. So we're seeing this unraveling of our government. And I can see why certain people in certain political parties, even on both sides of the spectrum, are terrified of what might come out if Trump is allowed to have 4 more years to pursue some of the stuff that would drain the swamp. Is there a deep state? Well, to tell me there isn't, you're going to have to work really hard now. Because before I used to kind of, I think that's great stuff for movies and great conspiracy theory stuff. But when I start watching how the news is doing things, how the moderators and the debates are so slanted, I start reading and seeing some things that just don't add up. And then I start saying, well, what's really going on? I really agree that COVID-19 is something to be concerned about, but not terrified of. President comes down with it and then recovers. That's a real bummer to his enemies. It's a real boost to some of us who are older, and I'm not as old as our president, that recovery is possible. And yes, I do know he got the best treatment because he is top guy in the country for making sure we need to keep him healthy. But I look at the fact that we were shut down. We're not able to do anything unless we're willing to go out and protest. And now you got to be careful what you protest. You got to be on the right side of the spectrum for protesting. Um, they lost me at that point. I totally just flushed the whole narrative down the toilet. You know, when they said that it was okay and more important to go do that, anybody with a reasonable mind has to say, really? You're really so concerned about people's lives, and yet you're not afraid to allow this type of activity to go on. The mask has been nothing but controversy from the get go. No, it doesn't do any good. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Um, where's the science on that? See, you can always find an expert or supposedly an expert who, if he doesn't want to follow true good science, can slant things any way he wants. We've got people, experts, who have done that over the years that they've slanted their viewpoints. True scientists, even if that's what they would like to see happen and that they like to have it verified, when they realize it's not, they're honest and they say, "Oh, it was a great theory. We're missing something because so far the evidence doesn't bear it out." That's a true honest scientist, and those are true experts that really will go through. And even when it's like, this doesn't align with my personal likes or dislikes, so that's something that we don't see much happening anymore. We don't have where we're allowed to have discourse. If we disagree, we're censored. Uh, or we're attacked or we're kicked out. And so it leaves it leaning one side. And if the news is telling me the truth, well, a long time ago, we should have already imploded from global warming and all the problems. Al Gore told us we would not reach this age. We had this many years, and yet we're here. So I look at that and I say, okay, we've got that. But even if the United States becomes 100% neutral in emissions, 100%, which is pretty hard to do, you still got China, you still got India, you still got Africa, you still got South America, larger populations and areas that if they don't, well, what good does it do? Again, I truly believe it's nothing more than to bankrupt this nation, to put American people into such economic bondage and crash our economy to the point that we can't even defend ourselves, let alone anybody else. Then, the bad guys can take over the world. America is that stopgap. America stands for true democracy. I just don't understand why they are claiming they're for democracy when they don't want dissension of opinions. We used to want to make sure that even the minority was heard and represented and not totally marginalized. And you know, our founding fathers were afraid of 49% of the people being ruled by 51% of the people, and even that 49 without representation. And that's always a concern. So the government was set up to have checks and balances. It was set up that no larger state had more uh, ability to dictate to the smaller states everything. And so that's the electoral college. But today we want this taken away, it seems like. And I've watched both sides of the parties when they won the popular vote, but lost the electoral college, how they complain. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. If your guy doesn't win, then you're upset. Well, it seems unfair. Well, it wasn't designed to be fair in the mind of people who couldn't reason out the idea. Like you said in Hunger Games, you got the wealthy areas, you got the poor people, the poor areas is fighting for survival. So if we were left to be like California, the whole nation would be pretty much bankrupt with extreme wealth on one end and extreme poverty for everywhere down. No middle class. That's the game. That's always been the game, and that's why they promote socialism, because that sounds like it's going to even the playing field. It's not. It's just going to be the next step to take us into total iron fist rule of communism. You know, and we're getting there. We've got the tech industry is fighting to maintain their billions and trillions. They want to be $1 trillion industries. And so if they can eliminate any and all competition, then that makes it work well for them. Not you and I, but for them. And so it's hard to get away from being reliant on some of these giant industries. It's hard for people to give up their Amazon Prime. It's hard for people to give up their Google accounts and go to a different media. It's hard to give up YouTube. It's hard to give up these things because we're Facebook. We're so locked into so many of the things that they know they have a real control. And as much as you may or may not like it, sometimes they're the only game in town, and so that's where they've gained this advantage. So, will there be a change now that you're going to see congressional hearings and things? I don't know. Microsoft has fought and they won, and I don't know. It just, I guess, depends on the resolve of the people on both sides of the aisle, and I just don't see, both sides working together. And there's much to lose on both sides because a lot of people are in the pockets of large pharmaceutics and tech industries and social media. So there's this whole how do you separate that? And that's what it should have been all along. I'm really for the term limits to make sure nobody can a longevity that gives them this obscene power. When you look at Mr. Biden's tax returns, and then 1 year later, from the hundreds of thousands to the millions, that tells you something. Our Senator Reid was a poor guy when he went and came out pretty wealthy. Clinton's, wow, look at the millions they have today. And I'm sure if I were to go looking at the Republican side, I'd see the same thing. It's just, I'm not even interested in it anymore. I've kind of lost interest in it because it seems like there's not much we can do about it. We wonder if the elections are fixed. I think they've been fixed in California and like Detroit and other places, because no sound reasonable people keep voting for this stuff that sucks the life out of their future and their children's future. If you tax the rich to the point that they leave the state, where's the money going to come from? How are you going to help those people with social programs? How are you going to make sure schools work and function? Especially when you tax all the people who would put money back into industry and in economics and business and employ people. When Obamacare shook our nation, and I didn't mean it shook us, it put us into depression. Businesses after businesses let go of people because they couldn't afford it, and realized we can have more income if we just don't have employees. And it was tough because they loved their employees. They wanted their employees to have a future, but they couldn't afford it. And so they had to just start shutting down and lowering how many people they could afford to have, and some couldn't. And so people lost their jobs, economics are gone. So really, when I hear Democrats talk about that they're for the working class and they want to help the poor, they're not. That's a con. It's a con game. It's taking playing on people's emotions, not on facts. It's not. So you take and tax, and then you raise the prices of everything else that goes up. We'll raise minimum wage, and then everything goes up. I watched in the 70s when we seen that same thing happen, and then I seen the price of everything double. And so I was making like five something an hour, and I was doing pretty good. And a year later, I wasn't doing as good because I didn't have as much spending power because everything else had gone up in price. And so, yeah, it might have sounded like it was a good idea to help people with lower wages, but they only had about 3 months before everything caught up, and then they were complaining again that they needed a greater uh, pay raise. And I get it that if you're on the lower pay scale, you're going to want more money, and that's the incentive usually is to do a good job and get promoted, or use that as a springboard to another industry where you could be paid. But our education system doesn't teach people good math and reading skills. And if you go to college and you get a degree in gender study, how does that help corporate America? How does that help small businesses? How does that help anyone produce more economics? It may have some areas of smoothing certain things, but it's just it's going to be a viable option. And you can't employ everybody who took those classes and those degrees everywhere. Only certain high level positions maybe. So when we take and we look at what we're paying teachers for putting themselves in debt for their remaining of their life, many of them, they're not getting a good income. But people are looking at, we pour more and more money into our education system only to see the quality of it going down. So something's broken, and the Democrats' ideas have always been throw more money at it, regulate things that do work, and if you're doing a good job, you want to take and be stifled and tax more. And so we're just in this vicious cycle in our society of not understanding the economic system. So, of course, if you can make capitalism an evil thing, then you don't have to worry about uh, how that economics work. But then, how do you come up with everybody who doesn't want to work and still get paid? Won't happen. You'll have to, you'll have to work, and In Russia, you end up in an undesirable area of life if you weren't productive or following the party line. And that's going to happen everywhere in the world at some point. So I look at what's going on today. I say, yeah, this is probably the greatest threat to democracy and the republic that I've ever seen. People on the left who want to totally destroy the Constitution and have no written Constitution. Why is that? Well, whatever emotional upheaval they have today, might not have tomorrow. So if we have it written down, then it can be used against us, right? The Constitution is held and has got built into it adaptability if it's done the right way. And so when I hear that we want to get rid of it, or everything's racist now, everything's racist, and I'm like, I just don't buy it. And I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to shake it up and make everybody mad at everybody so they can control. United we stand, divided we fall. Jesus said that. Abraham Lincoln experienced that, fought to keep the Union one and not have a separate nation underneath it all, and maybe conflict or foreign powers could come in easily and divide us even more. So we're looking at the total future of our country to be, fundamentally changed or destroyed. You can't do that if people are armed. So you're gonna have to get rid of guns. You're gonna have to create a scenario and enough backlash against people having the right to protect themselves. So all of this has been orchestrated for years, decades now. And most people are just, just kind of gotten tired of it. And new generations have been so indoctrinated that it seems like it's the only right way to go. And we've lost what it means to be an American. And as we lose that fundamental uh, cohesiveness that made us a nation of many people, um, well, the end result can't be good. So I encourage people to think for themselves, research. I get it, it's tough because there's so much slant out there, and on both sides it can be extreme. And you have to kind of start weighing things out and looking at things. History's been rewritten, so if you find old history books, that's a good idea because they don't like you to look at history because history tells you where you're going if you keep following the same path. I find it amazing whatever the left accuses everybody else of, that's what they're doing. They're fascist. They're Nazis. They're brown shirts. They're censoring. They're putting the signs on people, on their businesses. They're manipulating and trying to control and take away freedom, trying to force everybody to comply. Sure isn't American, is it? They want freedom to express themselves, but nobody else. They want tolerance from everybody else to tolerate them, but they have no tolerance. See, when it's truth, truth will prevail. And when it's not, you have to use force. You have to use manipulation. You have to use the games of the left and the media in order to get your lie to be bought. Well, this is another week of rant. Talk to you next week. Hey, till then, be safe. Think for yourself. Research what you can. I know it's laborsome. And if you don't think for yourself, somebody else will think for you. And soon somebody else will be telling you what to do. And pretty soon, well, you really don't want to know that future, but it may be here before you know it. Take care.